Brian lifted her wine glass, smiled sweetly across the table, and said, "Let's face it, Nan, you're going to die poor and alone." I stood up. Didn't say a word. My name is Nan. I'm 66 years old, and until that night I truly believed I had already survived the cruelest chapters of life. Abandonment, grief, poverty, and loneliness. I buried my husband Richard 3 winters ago. I buried my mother in spring. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me. For the moment, my own daughter-in-law laughed at me across a white linen restaurant table and told me I'd die poor and alone. The invitation came in the mail, printed on heavy cream cardstock, with gold embossing exactly the kind Brian, my daughter-in-law, insisted on for everything. "Please join us for an intimate family celebration," it read in her perfect script. Desmond, my only son, was turning 38. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready. I don't have many dresses left, just a few nice ones I'd kept after selling our family home. But I still had the navy blue one with the tiny pearl buttons, Richard's favorite. He used to say I looked like a woman in a Monet painting when I wore it. I pulled it from the back of the closet, brushed it off, and laid it gently across my bed. I even splurged and went to the salon to have my silver hair set into soft waves. It wasn't much, but it made me feel presentable. Funny choice of word, presentable. That's exactly what Brian called me when I arrived. The restaurant was one of those luxury places that whispers money in every detail. Crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen rain, and the white tablecloths were pressed so perfectly they looked like sculpted marble. I walked in, clutching a purse I'd owned for 15 years. The hostess gave me a long glance before walking me to their table. Desmond stood to greet me. For a moment, just a flicker, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who ran into my arms after school, who clung to me during thunderstorms. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said and hugged him. He smiled, but it felt distant. Formal? Like a handshake instead of an embrace. Brian was seated, already blonde hair, coiled into a severe updo. Her dress was crisp, flawless, expensive. When she looked at me, her eyes swept from my hair to my shoes in one quick blink. "Nan," she said with a tight smile. "How lovely you look. Presentable. Presentable. Not beautiful, not elegant, not even you look nice. Presentable. As if I were a charity case who dressed up for her last meal." Dinner began politely enough. Desmond talked about his promotion at the law firm. Brian mentioned their upcoming trip to Italy, Tuscany, Florence, Capri. All luxury, all curated. I nodded, smiled, added small comments where I could. But every time I spoke, Brian's lips curled into that knowing little smile that made my chest tighten. The waiter brought the wine list. Brian didn't hesitate. "We'll have the Chateau Margaux," she said, with theatrical flair, then turned to me and added, "unless maybe something more economical would be better." Her smile was sugary sweet, dripping with mock concern. "I know things have been a little tight since you moved into that little apartment." My cheeks burned. My voice came out steady but cold. "The wine sounds lovely. I didn't want to cause a scene, not tonight." But Brian wasn't done. She asked about my living situation. I mentioned that I was volunteering part-time at the community center, and she actually laughed. "Oh, that's adorable," she said. "Bingo with the other lonely old ladies. That must be so fulfilling for you." Desmond didn't say a word. He just sliced his steak and kept his eyes on the plate. I tried to redirect the conversation, talk about the neighborhood, ask about their dog, something, anything. But Brian wasn't interested in small talk. She kept steering the conversation back to money success, their future children, their recent renovations. I felt smaller and smaller with each passing minute, as if the chair beneath me were sinking into the polished floor. When Brian excused herself to go to the restroom, I saw my chance. I reached across the table and touched Desmond's hand. "Honey," I said gently, "is everything okay?" He pulled his hand away. "Mom," he began, "about your living situation. We're a little concerned." I blinked. Concerned. Well, Brian and I were talking, and maybe it's time to consider other options. Other options. My voice was a whisper. He looked nervous. "You know, Something safer. A facility, maybe. Assisted living. Somewhere you wouldn't be alone. Brian returned just in time to catch the tail end of the conversation. She sat down, folded her napkin into her lap, and said, "We were just talking about how worried we are. I told Desmond that it's not sustainable you living in that tiny apartment eating canned soup volunteering just to have somewhere to go during the day. It's honestly quite sad." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Brian took a long sip of wine, then set the glass down, looked me dead in the eyes, and delivered the final blow. I mean, let's face it, you're going to die poor and alone anyway. Wouldn't it be better to do so with some dignity? I turned to Desmond, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father left, the boy I'd worked night shifts to feed, whose college I paid for by skipping meals and birthdays and anniversaries. He said nothing, just stared at his plate, so I stood up and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the parking lot. I just walked. Through the pristine lobby, past the hostess who gave me a puzzled look, and out into the cold night air. My heels clicked on the pavement as I moved, not with purpose, not with destination, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't come from rage or pride or shock. The kind that comes when you realize a truth so plain it strips your bones bare. They didn't see me. Not as a mother, not as a woman, not even as a person. Desmond didn't run after me this time, not right away. I had already reached my car when the restaurant door opened. "Mom, wait," I stopped. My hand was on the door handle, the cold metal stinging against my palm. "Brian didn't mean it like that," he said, breathless. I turned slowly. "Didn't she? She's worried. About you." "Worried?" I repeated. "Is that what that was? Concern?" He looked away like a boy caught in a lie. "It's hard for her to see people not living up to their potential. My potential," I said the words tasting like ash, "to do what Desmond applauded while she dismantles the last pieces of my dignity." He opened his mouth, closed it. "You didn't defend me," I said quietly. "I didn't want to cause a scene," he offered weakly. But the scene had already happened, just not the one he feared. The real scene was inside my heart, a collapse so quiet, so complete, that even I hadn't realized it until that moment. "I'll be fine," I said, getting into my car. "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "I'm done." And I drove home in silence, through bright city lights and into the quiet stillness of my modest apartment. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by stillness and the scent of lavender from a candle I'd forgotten to snuff out. I sat in Richard's old recliner, the one with a worn patch on the armrest where he used to drum his fingers while reading the paper. I looked around the apartment. Sparse, but clean. Small, but mine. I cried. Not because I was humiliated, not even because I was angry. I cried because I had believed, truly believed, that if I just loved them hard enough, they'd see me, that if I made myself smaller, simpler, quieter, they'd finally let me belong. But the only thing people like Brian respect is power. And I had it. I had it all along. I just never used it. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun hadn't even risen. I made a pot of strong coffee, the kind Richard used to drink, and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by paper. My bank statements, my property titles, my portfolio summary. I was not poor. Not by any stretch. What I was careful, disciplined, and deliberately underestimated. Richard had been brilliant with money. Long before it was trendy, he had invested in companies like Apple and Amazon, real estate in neighborhoods that gentrified, government bonds with generous yields. And when he passed, he left it all to me. His will was handwritten and notarized, simple, direct. "Take care of yourself, Nain," it said. "You always took care of me." And I had. I had worked double shifts during Desmond's childhood just so he could go to a better school. I skipped vacations and holidays to keep food on the table. I wore thrifted clothes so he could wear brand names without knowing the sacrifice. And now at 66, I realized that all I had built in silence had been completely invisible to the people I loved most. But not anymore. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in nearly a year. Chen Law Office, this is Marisol. Hi, this is Nain Winters. I need to speak to Margaret. It's urgent. One moment, please. There was hold music. Something soft. Classical. Then Nain Margaret Chen said warmly, "It's been too long." "How are you ready?" I said. She paused. "Ready for what?" "To make some changes." I heard the rustle of papers on her end. "To your will, yes. Effective immediately. I want my son removed. Entirely. And his wife is never to be a beneficiary of anything I own. That's a big decision. Are you sure I'm certain?" There was silence on the line. Then, "All right. We'll start with a full estate revision. Any idea where you want the assets redirected?" I had thought about that. A lot. About the kind of people who deserved what I had to give. "There's a nonprofit," I said. Silver Connections. They help elderly folks who've been abandoned by their families. Housing, social activities, end-of-life support. I want everything to go to them. Everything, everything. The house I haven't bought yet, the properties, the investments. I want to build something permanent, something that outlives me. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll draw up the documents. Can you come in this week? I'll be there this afternoon." After I hung up, I sat still for a long moment. The heater hummed gently in the background. A bus rolled past outside. Then I stood. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. Most of my clothes were practical sweaters, slacks, a few dresses. But near the back behind a garment bag was the black Chanel suit I hadn't worn in over a decade. The one I'd bought during my final year working as a financial analyst. Before I retired early to help Desmond through law school. I tried it on. It still fit. Then I called the salon. "Hi, Jenny. It's Nan. I'd like to come in for a real cut this time. Something sharp." There was a pause on the other end. Then Jenny laughed. "Girl, it's about time." And just like that, the woman I used to be stepped back into the light. The house wasn't in the brochures. It wasn't on Zillow or Redfin either, because it wasn't for the public. It was for them, the kind of people who knew people. The ones who didn't ask, "What's the square footage but who built the kitchen?" Brian's parents had been trying to buy it for years. Everyone in her circle knew the villa at Rivermore Hill, private road, 5-bedroom Spanish revival, custom ironwork imported from Granada, and views that stretched for miles as if the sky itself was tilted just for you. They never could close, always outbid, always outmaneuvered, and now it was mine. All because the widow who owned it had gone to Silver Connections, the nonprofit I'd quietly started funding after Richard's death. She remembered my name, remembered I'd once helped her carry groceries in the rain when she could barely walk. She called me directly. "Mrs. Winters," she said, her voice frail but sharp, "I'd like to offer you the first look at something special." I toured the house alone. No realtors, no cameras, just me and my memories. Richard would have loved it. He'd always dreamed of retiring in a house with an atrium. And there it was, centered like a sacred heart, filled with bougainvillea and sunlight. I made an offer on the spot, above asking, in cash. I didn't even blink. Margaret sent over the trust documents the same day. The house would be held in the name of the Winters Foundation, untouchable, untraceable, unbreakable. By the following week, I had the keys, and that's when the gossip started. Desmond called one morning nervous chipper. "Hey, Mom, just heard from a colleague that someone bought the Rivermore house. Can you believe that must be some tech investor or foreign buyer?" I sipped my tea. "Must be," I said. "Well, listen, I was thinking, maybe we could do dinner again soon, just us." "Oh yeah, I feel like things got a little out of hand with Brian the other night." I murmured. "She means well. You know how intense she gets." "She gets what she wants," I corrected. He laughed nervously. Right, but look, I was thinking it might be fun to celebrate your birthday this year. Go big. My birthday." "Yeah, we could even host at the new house," he said, throwing it out casually. "I'm sure they'll do something fabulous with it eventually. Those places are made for events." I set my cup down. What new house? I asked, feigning ignorance. The one on Rivermore. Oh, that's mine. Silence. Then, what? I bought it. Last week. He laughed too loud. Very funny. I'm not joking. You? What are you talking about? I own the house on Rivermore Hill, Desmond. I've owned it for 6 days. Silence. Then, but how cash? I said simply, and some goodwill. You never said you were looking. You never asked. That's when the tone shifted, from shock to something colder, something calculating. Is this some kind of power move? I paused. Does it feel like one? He didn't answer. I don't need a house to prove anything, I said gently, but I do need space and legacy and peace, and we're not part of that legacy. You made that clear the moment Brian said I'd embarrass your firm. That's not fair. No, it's not, I agreed. The call ended with promises to talk later, but I knew we wouldn't, not for a while, because I had just shattered a myth, the myth of mother as dependent, the myth of Nyan as diminished, and people don't like it when you destroy their illusions, especially not the ones that make them feel superior. The housewarming was private. I invited a few people from Silver Connections, a young woman named Karina, who ran logistics with the precision of a general, an older gentleman named Walter, who made everyone laugh so hard they cried, and Margaret, who toasted me with a glass of rosé and said, "You know what I love about you, Nain? You never ask permission to bloom." The rooms came alive that night, music from the garden, lanterns casting golden flickers on the stucco walls. I stood by the atrium wearing the black Chanel suit, now tailored to perfection, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Later, I posted a photo on my barely used social media account. Just one. The atrium. Bathed in morning light. Caption: for those who thought I'd disappear, I found somewhere better. Within an hour, Brian saw it. She commented, "Beautiful space. Who owns it?" I replied simply, "Me." No emojis, no hashtags, just truth. And that's when the unraveling began. 3 days after that post, they came to the house. No call, no text, just tires on gravel, a silver Audi pulling into my drive like they owned it. I watched from the upstairs hallway as Brian stepped out, first sunglasses on expression unreadable. Desmond followed, slower shoulders tight. He looked like a child again, the one who used to cling to my hand at grocery stores when he got overwhelmed, except now his hand was wrapped around a Mont Blanc pen. I didn't go down. I waited. Made them ring twice. When I finally opened the door, I didn't smile. Brian went first. We just wanted to see for ourselves. She didn't ask permission. She walked right past me, heels clicking on imported stone tile eyes, scanning the architecture like a vulture circling for weakness. Desmond lingered behind. We should have called. But you didn't, I replied. Mom, this doesn't make sense. You hate big houses. I hate being told I don't belong in one, I said flatly. Brian turned in the atrium, her voice bouncing against the tile. Is this what you needed Nan to feel powerful? No, I said. But it's a nice side effect. Her jaw flexed. This isn't like you. You mean it's not like the version of me you preferred? Quiet, apologetic, easily managed. She stepped closer. This feels vindictive. I didn't move. Tell me, Brian, was it vindictive when you told your assistant to change the dinner venue so I wouldn't be on the reservation list? Her expression shifted, just a flicker, but I saw it. I had to protect the firm, she said too quickly. From what I asked, a woman you think is beneath you. Desmond stepped in. Can we please not do this here, I echoed. Interesting choice of words. Because here is mine now. You walked into my space. You paid in cash, Brian said suddenly, like it was an accusation. I did. Then that means you liquidated something. Or someone helped you. Who? Walter, the nonprofit. No one helped me, I said calmly. I made decisions. Quietly, strategically, like you taught me. She didn't like that. Look, she snapped. We didn't come to fight. But people are talking, Nain. The whispers about where your money came from, whether this is even legal. I cut her off. You want to talk legal? I pulled a folder from the sideboard, set it down between us. Margaret's work. Pristine. Ironclad. A notarized record of the trust. Purchase receipts. Documentation of every source of funding, including a private settlement I'd received years ago when Richard's business partner tried to cut me out after his death. All above board. All earned. Brian didn't touch it. But she looked at Desmond. And he, God help him, still tried to defend her. I thought we were family. You mean the family who laughed while your wife erased me at dinner? That wasn't the intent. It was the outcome, I said. He looked away. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. You both spent years watching me shrink to fit your comfort. You mistook that shrinking for weakness. And now that I've expanded into something you can't control, it frightens you. I'm not frightened, Brian said sharply. No, I nodded. You're furious. She opened her mouth, closed it again. And then with a voice laced in ice, you should be careful who you try to impress. This little show won't protect you when things fall apart. I tilted my head. I'm not performing Brian. I'm becoming. She stormed out. Desmond hesitated, his eyes begging for resolution, but I gave him none. He followed her to the car. They didn't look back. Later that evening, Margaret called. I assume they visited, yes. Did she threaten litigation? Not directly, but her tone carried the weight of entitlement. She's used to getting her way. Margaret sighed. Let me guess. She believes your success was somehow stolen from her. Of course, that's the narrative now, that I must have conned someone or manipulated. She'll try to twist the story. You're ready for that. I walked to the window, watched the sky shift to dusk over my garden. I'm not afraid of stories anymore, I said. I know who I am. That night, I posted again. A simple video, just me walking through the atrium barefoot holding a cup of tea. The caption read, There's a difference between silence and submission. One is peace. The other is fear. Guess which one I chose? It went viral, not because of Flash, but because people saw what they weren't supposed to. A woman unbothered, a mother unshaken, a widow undefeated. By the end of the week, the video had 48,000 views, then $100,000, then 1.2 million. I wasn't even in frame the entire time, just glimpses of my hand brushing the bougainvillea, my footsteps echoing in the atrium, my voice once. One comment read, This isn't just a house. This is peace. Another, she carries power like silk, smooth, quiet, untouchable. It reached the feeds of women in law elder advocacy groups, even architecture students who begged to tour the villa for study. I declined them all, not out of arrogance, but because I knew the difference now between public admiration and personal boundaries. The whispers changed. At Brian's firm, murmurs grew. An intern overheard a partner say, Her mother bought the Rivermore property, outright. Do you know how hard it is to even get a tour of that place? At a city fundraiser, one of Desmond's clients nudged him. Isn't that your mom in the video that's going around? She's got presence. Desmond smiled weakly. Brian clenched her jaw. But the real shift came the following Friday. I received an embossed invitation, heavy cardstock, wax seal, gold trim. The city was awarding community leaders in a new annual gala, the Founders of Future Award. And I was one of the honorees, nominated anonymously. The board chair called to confirm. We selected you for your quiet contributions, she said, for the grants, the legal assistance you've quietly offered elderly homeowners, and for the way you carry yourself, carry myself. You remind people what dignity looks like. I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen behind my ribs. The gala was held at the Langford Museum. Velvet seats, live orchestra, media coverage. Brian and Desmond were both there, nominated for separate projects, sitting at a table near the front. I was placed behind them, not as family, but as guest of honor. When they called my name, the room shifted. Cameras turned, murmurs swelled, One reporter whispered, "That's her." Brian's face turned pale. I rose slowly, walked the length of the marble stage, took the mic with both hands. I didn't give a long speech, just one sentence. True legacy isn't what you build for show, it's what survives when the noise fades. Applause, a standing ovation, not because I was loud, but because I was undeniable. Later that evening at the reception buffet, Desmond approached. "You didn't tell us you were being honored. You haven't asked about my life in years," I said simply. He looked genuinely torn. "I didn't know. I know," I replied. That was the whole problem. Behind him, Brian stood still, lips pressed tight. Her colleague leaned in and asked her something quietly. Brian nodded toward me. "That's my mother-in-law," I heard her say. And for once she didn't say it with contempt. She said it with caution. When I returned to the villa that night, the sky was low with stars. I stood in the atrium, looking up barefoot again. The echoes felt warmer now. Not empty, just earned. I didn't post that night. Didn't need to. The world already knew. 2 weeks after the gala, I received an envelope. No return address. Handwritten. Inside a letter from Richard. Nin, I saw the video. I saw you. And for the first time in my life, I felt shame. I told myself I left to protect Brian. But the truth is, I left because I couldn't face what I was becoming. You were always the anchor. You held the family together even when we made you invisible. I can't undo the years. But I spoke to my lawyer. I'm signing over the Hudson Street Trust to you and your name alone. No conditions. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But maybe I can still give back what I took. R. I stared at it for a long time. The Hudson Street Trust was worth millions. Richard's legacy once destined for Desmond and Brian, but now, mine. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. I didn't respond to his letter. Not yet. Some things are better left suspended, but I made a choice that week. The villa, I renamed it. Eden's Turn, inspired by my mother, Eden, who used to say, "One day it'll be your turn, baby. Maybe not first, maybe not fast, but yours." And I turned the property into something more than a home. I established a quiet living center, a retreat for women over 60 navigating estrangement, grief, or betrayal, a place to rebuild without shame. We don't advertise it loudly, but we don't have to. One visitor leaves, another one finds her way in. The walls don't echo anymore. They hum. Brian and Desmond haven't returned, but I know they've seen the papers, the donation announcements, the silent headlines, "Retired lawyer turns betrayal into sanctuary." And I've heard whispers from their circles. That Brian keeps her voice lower when speaking about me. That Desmond's firm reached out about future collaborations. I declined. Legacy isn't revenge. Legacy is control over your own name. Sometimes I walk the garden path at dusk, barefoot. The flowers are fuller now, blooming without apology. I sit under the arbor, watch the wind shift through the leaves, and I think they wanted me to fade. But instead, I became unforgettable. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter until it was too late for them to undo it? Share your story in the comments. And if you've ever rebuilt yourself quietly on your own terms, just know you're not alone. Subscribe for more true stories of quiet power and cold justice. We see you, always.